Well, I remember basketball. We had a basketball goal in our across the street in a vacant lot that we owned, and I spent a lot of time there. So we'd have to get a new ball frequently because they didn't have the rubber type balls as they did later. But people have asked me a lot of questions over the years. They ask about North Carolina. They ask about the championships. They ask about the Final Fours. Sometimes they ask about Michael Jordan. Sometimes they ask about James Worthy or the teams that were fortunate enough to cut down the nets. Those are good memories. I'm grateful people still care enough to ask. But every once in a while, someone asks me something that takes a little longer to answer. Coach, who are the 5 greatest college basketball players you ever respected? Now that's a different kind of question. You see, most people hear the word greatest and they immediately think about points, championships, awards, or what a player eventually became in the NBA. I understand that those things matter. They always will. But after spending more than 3 decades coaching young men, I came to believe greatness isn't measured only by what shows up in a record book. It's measured by the standards a player sets for everyone around him. It's measured by how hard he practices when nobody is watching, how he treats the last player on the bench, how he responds after a difficult loss, how much trust his teammates place in him when everything is on the line. I've coached remarkable players. I've competed against extraordinary players, and I've admired many more from a distance. Each one taught me something different about basketball. More importantly, they taught me something about leadership, humility, discipline, and character. So this isn't a ranking. I'm not trying to decide who scored the most points or won the most games. These are simply 5 men I came to respect more deeply than almost anyone else in college basketball. Let me start with Pete Maravich. I can still remember preparing for LSU during those years. Whenever our staff sat down to watch film, the conversation always seemed to end the same way. We weren't asking whether Pete Maravich could score. We already knew he could. The real question was how long we could keep him from taking complete control of the game. That's a very different problem. As coaches, we spend our lives looking for patterns. Players usually develop habits, certain moves, certain tendencies, certain places on the floor where they feel most comfortable. Pete never seemed interested in following those rules. The more film we watched, the more we realized that he was creating solutions in real time. One possession never looked exactly like the one before it. He could beat you with a jump shot, then a pass that nobody in the building expected, and then somehow find another angle that didn't seem to exist a second earlier. People remember the scoring record, and they should. More than 3,600 career points without the benefit of a three-point line is one of the most extraordinary accomplishments college basketball has ever seen. But if you ask me why I respected Pete, it wasn't because of the numbers. It was because he forced every coach in America to think differently. He challenged our preparation. He challenged our discipline. He challenged our imagination. I always believe that great players make their teammates better. Pete did that in his own way. He also made opposing coaches better because you couldn't prepare for LSU with an ordinary game plan. You had to reconsider everything you thought you knew about defending one player. That's a rare compliment. There were times when we'd finish watching film, and instead of talking about what Pete had done wrong, we'd spend our time discussing how our own players needed to communicate better, rotate quicker, and stay mentally engaged for every possession. Very few players have that kind of influence before the opening tip even arrives. That's what impressed me most. Pete wasn't changing basketball only while the game was being played. He was changing the way coaches taught the game all week long. As the years passed, I found myself respecting something even deeper, Pete never tried to play like someone else. He trusted his own instincts. He accepted the responsibility that came with being the center of every scouting report and every defensive game plan. That isn't easy for a young man. Some players shrink under that kind of attention. Pete never stopped being himself. When I think about respect, that's where it begins. Not with trophies, not with headlines. It begins with someone who is talented enough to transform the game, yet courageous enough to remain true to the player he was. Pete Maravich did exactly that. And college basketball is richer because he played it. I've got to continue with Bill Walton. People often assume the first thing I respected about Bill was that he won championships. Of course, I respected that. Anyone who watched those UCLA teams understood they were special. But championships were never the first thing that came to my mind when I thought about Bill Walton. It was the way he played the game. I remember watching UCLA during John Wooden's final seasons and thinking that Bill never seemed interested in proving he was the best player on the floor. His goal was something much harder. He wanted everyone around him to become better. For a coach, that's impossible to ignore. You could watch one possession and see him score in the post, and the next time down the floor he'd throw an outlet pass that started a fast break before the defense even knew what had happened. A few possessions later he'd rotate across the lane, block a shot, secure the rebound, and immediately begin another possession. Everything happened with purpose. Nothing felt forced. That's one of the reasons those UCLA teams were so difficult to play against. They never looked like 5 individuals trying to have great nights. They looked like one basketball team. And Bill was right at the center of that identity. I also admired how completely he bought into Coach Wooden's philosophy. Now, I've always believed that talent alone never builds a championship program. Every coach wants gifted players. What separates the truly great ones is whether those players are willing to be coached. Bill Walton already had extraordinary ability. He could have relied on that. Instead, he embraced discipline. He practiced the little things. He accepted correction. He understood that improvement never stops, no matter how talented you are. That's something every coach dreams of finding. One game has always stayed with me. The 1973 national championship against Memphis State. Bill finished the night making 21 of his 22 field goal attempts. People still talk about that remarkable shooting performance. I understand why, but when I watched that game, I wasn't counting baskets. I was watching his decision making. He never forced the action. He trusted the offense. He trusted his teammates. He simply took the right shot almost every time the ball found him. To me, that performance represented everything college basketball should be. Efficient, unselfish, composed, completely committed to the team. When I think about Bill Walton today, I don't think first about the trophies or the undefeated seasons. I think about a young man who proved that humility and excellence can exist together. He showed that leadership isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in the player who's willing to make the extra pass, set one more screen, rotate one more time on defense, and accept coaching every single day. That's why Bill Walton earned my respect long before he became one of the greatest players the game has ever known. Looking back now, I'd have to mention Oscar Robertson. By the time I became a head coach, Oscar had already established himself as one of the greatest players college basketball had ever seen. I didn't have the opportunity to coach against him, but like every coach of my generation, I studied him. And the more I learned about the way he played at Cincinnati, the more respect I gained for the man behind the statistics. People today see the triple-doubles, they see the scoring, they see the awards. Those things deserve every bit of recognition they receive. But what impressed me most was how completely Oscar controlled a basketball game. He never seemed rushed. He never appeared to be playing faster than everyone else. Instead, it always looked as though everyone else was trying to catch up to his pace. That's a very different kind of greatness. As coaches, we're constantly teaching players to make the right decision, take the right shot, find the open teammate, read the defense. Oscar seemed to do all of those things naturally. He wasn't forcing the game to fit his abilities. He understood what each possession required, and then he made the smartest play available. That kind of basketball intelligence can't simply be taught. It's something very few players are fortunate enough to possess. I also admired the responsibility he carried throughout his college career. Every opponent knew exactly who Cincinnati depended on. Every scouting report began with Oscar Robertson. Every defensive plan was designed around slowing him down. Yet, week after week, season after season, he continued producing at an extraordinary level. That's not just talent. That's consistency. And consistency has always been one of the qualities I respected most in any player. There's another reason Oscar has always remained special to me. He played during a time when the challenges facing young black athletes reached far beyond basketball. Despite those obstacles, he carried himself with remarkable dignity. He competed with confidence. He demanded excellence from himself. And he represented his university with pride. Those are qualities every coach hopes to see in the young people who wear his school's uniform. Over the years, I've told many of my own players that the game will eventually reveal who you really are. Pressure has a way of doing that. Oscar Robertson never seemed interested in proving he was the loudest man in the gym. He simply let his preparation, his discipline, and his decisions speak for him. When I think about respect, that's exactly where my mind goes. Not to a box score, not to another award. I think about a player who showed that intelligence could be just as dominant as athletic ability. A player who made everyone around him better without ever needing to draw attention to himself. Oscar Robertson left college basketball with an extraordinary legacy. But the reason I've always respected him goes far beyond the records. He demonstrated that true greatness begins with understanding the game, respecting the people around you, and carrying yourself with quiet confidence every single day. Then I'd have to talk about Michael Jordan. I know what some people are probably thinking. Coach, of course Michael would be on your list. They're right, but maybe not for the reasons they expect. Most people think about the 6 NBA championships, the MVP awards, the global superstar. When I think about Michael, my mind always goes back to Chapel Hill. I remember a young freshman who arrived with tremendous ability, but who understood he still had a great deal to learn. That's what impressed me from the very beginning. Michael never walked into our program believing talent alone would carry him. He listened. He practiced. He competed every single day as though someone was trying to take his place. For a coach, there's nothing more encouraging than seeing a gifted player remain coachable. One moment everyone remembers is the 1982 National Championship game against Georgetown. Michael made the winning jump shot with 15 seconds remaining. People have shown that highlight for decades, and they should. It was one of the defining moments in NCAA history. But I've always believed that shot became possible because of everything that happened before it. Because Michael had earned the trust of his teammates, because he had earned the confidence of our coaching staff, because he had prepared himself to be ready when that moment finally arrived. Championship moments don't appear out of nowhere. They're built through countless ordinary days that nobody remembers. That's the lesson Michael reinforced every single season he played for us. There was another quality I respected just as much. Michael loved competition, not just on game day. Every practice mattered to him. Every drill became an opportunity to improve. He challenged his teammates, but he also challenged himself. he never wanted yesterday's performance to be good enough for today. That kind of mindset spreads through an entire locker room. Young players notice it. Veteran players respond to it. Before long, it becomes part of the culture. Every successful program depends on people who are willing to raise the standard for everyone else. Michael certainly did that at North Carolina. As his career continued beyond college, the world came to know him as one of the greatest athletes who ever lived. I wasn't surprised. The public was finally seeing what we'd already witnessed every day, not just extraordinary talent, extraordinary commitment. When I think about Michael Jordan, I don't begin with championships or famous shots. I think about humility. I think about preparation. I think about a young man who accepted coaching, embraced responsibility, and never believed he was bigger than the team. Those qualities earned my respect long before the rest of the world began calling him the greatest. And if every player I've ever coached had shared that same attitude, I honestly believe every coach in America would have slept a little better at night. The last person I have to mention is Bill Russell. Some people may be surprised that I chose him over other legendary college players. I understand that there have been so many remarkable athletes in this game. But respect has never been about comparing resumes. It's about recognizing the people who changed what college basketball could become. Bill Russell certainly did that. When I first studied those University of San Francisco teams, the numbers were impressive. Back-to-back national championships, a winning streak that seemed almost impossible. But what caught my attention wasn't the trophies. It was the way Bill influenced every possession without needing to score all the points himself. Long before people started talking about defensive impact the way they do today, Bill was showing everyone what it looked like. He protected the basket. He controlled rebounds. He anticipated plays before they developed. Most importantly, he made every teammate feel more confident simply because he was on the floor. That's an extraordinary gift. As a coach, I've always believed defense begins with trust. Players have to believe the man behind them will be there if they make a mistake. Watching Bill Russell, you could see that trust. His teammates defended more aggressively because they knew he would be waiting. That doesn't always show up in a box score, but coaches notice it immediately. It's one of the reasons winning follows players like Bill wherever they go. There was another reason I came to admire him even more as the years passed. Bill understood that leadership doesn't end when the final buzzer sounds. He carried himself with tremendous dignity during a time when many athletes faced challenges that had nothing to do with basketball. He never allowed success to separate him from his principles. Whether people agreed with him or not, they always knew where he stood. That kind of courage deserves respect. I try to teach my own players that basketball is only part of your education. The game prepares you for life. It teaches responsibility. It teaches sacrifice. It teaches you how to serve something bigger than yourself. When I looked at Bill Russell, I saw someone who lived those values every single day. That's why his influence reached far beyond the court. Years pass. Records are broken. Championship banners become part of history. But character has a way of lasting much longer than any statistic. When I think about Bill Russell, I don't simply remember one of the greatest college players I've ever studied. I remember a man who showed generations of athletes that true greatness isn't measured only by victories. It's measured by the standards you refuse to compromise, the respect you earn from the people around you, and the example you leave behind long after your final game has been played. That's the kind of legacy every coach hopes his players will build. When I think about everything college basketball has given me, I realize the wins were only one part of the journey. The championships brought unforgettable celebrations. The Final Fours created memories that will live on in every school that was fortunate enough to be there. the banners will continue hanging in those arenas long after all of us are gone. And someday every record we've ever celebrated will probably be broken. That's the way sports are supposed to work. But respect isn't measured that way. Respect lives in the people you meet along the way. It's found in the teammate who puts the team ahead of himself, the opponent who forces you to become a better coach, the player who chooses character over recognition. Those are the people who stay with you long after the crowds disappear. I've always believed college basketball is different. It's never been just a path to the next level. It's a place where young men discover who they are, where lifelong friendships begin, and where lessons learned inside a locker room often matter far more than anything written in a box score. I'm grateful that this game allowed me to spend my life around people who challenged me, inspired me, and reminded me every season that success means very little if it isn't built on integrity. If people remember me as a coach, I hope they remember the championships. But even more than that, I hope they remember that we tried to build good teams by first helping young men become good people. Because when the cheering finally fades, that's the legacy that lasts the longest.